I'm Herb Stevenson.
Hi, I'm Sahadeo Ramharak.
We welcome you to National Passages, a podcast about revealing the unmarked doors of life. Today we will chat about the ping-pong effect, where most people bounce back and forth between the past and future, never stopping in the present moment.
So let's jump right in. What is the ping-pong effect?
Best way to describe it is because of the way society works. And when I say that, it's how we are taught in order to function or survive the things our parents teach us, the customs, the values, the rights, the wrongs, and all these other things. We tend to be in a binary thing of trying to deal with our past, something that happened that's unresolved, or trying to create a future that isn't here yet that would feel better. And we don't spend a whole lot of time in the present moment. So the monkey mind comes from the reason that I call it the monkey mind, from your tradition, though it goes even beyond that, is it's the bouncing back and forth between the past and the future. Okay, I dealt with that. What do I have to do next? It can be that simple, but it's a constant process of going back and forth. So what I've observed, and I've worked with different people, is sometimes they start telling a story and it's about the past. The next thing you know, it's as if they're right there. And at a certain point, when the energy gets too strong, because whatever it was that made that a frozen memory, the energy or the emotions get too high, and they suddenly change the story, and now we're talking about the future of how to make that either go away or to create something that feels better. Okay. Now think about how many times we go back and forth every day in our conversations, and we're playing basically ping pong with the mind. So for your sake, this is a more advanced state of monkey mind.
Yeah. And people are not aware that they're doing this.
No, they're not aware of it. And that's really the issue, because part of the problem in my opinion, it's what led to watching this, because I see this in all my clients or just very people working, is in the present moment we have so much sensation, which is, if you think about it as a child coming in and their body's full of sensation, all these people are making these strange sounds that don't make meaning yet until the brain finally creates its own program, and now I can make meaning of words. So sensation becomes too difficult, and what ends up happening, we start numbing out. We start not paying attention to certain things and paying attention to other things. Okay, that's just basically living life or coordinating life. And so when I started watching the ping-pong effect, is the number of people bouncing back and forth all constant time, and I would stop and I'd say, what's happening right now? And do you have even a felt sense of yourself in your body? And it startles them, because they're like, what? And I said, well, we're talking about the past, we're talking about future. Truth is, neither of those are real. One's gone, the other's your imagination. What's happening right here in this moment? And I asked them just to sit with that for a while. And at first the monkey mind drives them crazy, because it wants to jump one place or another, because it feels safe playing games back and forth.
It's like at the beginning of meditation.
Yeah, it happens a lot in meditation, because if you really track yourself in meditation, you're going from the past to the future, back and forth, over and over, until one day the mind realizes this is boring, and it shuts up, and the person gets fully present and has a good experience in their meditation. And it's just sitting with it. But one day what happens is you witness yourself, wow, I'm just bouncing back and forth. I wonder what it'd feel like if I stopped doing that. And when they do that, it starts shifting things, and they start having more awareness. Oh, wow, I'm starting to notice myself, my body, how I'm feeling, like we talked in the last podcast. And so the ping pong effect is, when I've taught that to people, they can track themselves, because they'll realize, oh, I'm in a story about the past and I'm really pissed. And then they catch themselves, oh, I'm going to think about something more pleasant. So they jump over here.
Mm-hmm.
But because they're now seeing it, they actually experience it. So several men in the men's program, or people in clients that I've helped work with, when they started catching themselves, they also started hearing it in other people.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
So now you can begin to witness this thing that's
Yes.
happening.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversation shift saying is what, one of the things that I often say to people is okay, to help them get through it, I'll say, all right, if we're dealing with something, what's working, what's not working,
Mm-hmm.
and they list that, and I say, now I want to know what's working you.
Okay.
And that makes them go inside
Yeah.
and realize what's the driving force of bouncing back and forth. The impact of that is they get an insight of realizing, well, what's really behind this, and it could be a number of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But often a worry or a concern or some unfinished business or something of that nature. And so when I help them or support them to end up being just present to this moment,
Mm-hmm.
what's my felt sense? And they'll say, what's felt sense? I said, what do you notice in your body?
Mm-hmm.
Anything. What's the first thing comes to your mind? Say, oh, my back hurts. Okay. So let's just pay attention to the fact your back hurts, just for a moment. And at first they'll play this game of, well, this sucks because that makes it hurt worse.
Okay.
And then they jump to, can we get a couple of aspirins going to the future so I can fix it?
Mm-hmm.
And I say, so what if we just take a few deep breaths and just relax a little bit and just see what happens with the energy if it dissipates?
Mm-hmm.
And frequently it will dissipate. Now, if it's a chronic condition, it won't. But it at least brings them back to, and if I have to, we'll go get 2 Tylenol
Mm-hmm.
so that we can get present and stop the ping pong and saying, get back to what's working you. What's going on that's causing you difficulty at this moment? And usually they get an insight. They're the wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has the wisdom if they slow down to the present moment. So,
And it's grounding.
and it's grounding. Everything comes back to grounding.
So are there any specific things? I know we already mentioned like some techniques, which is breathing, asking people to become back present to their body. But if you've never done that before, how do you do that?
Well, first, implied to what you just asked is, how do you try? And you don't try, you just practice it. So I feel my body, I wiggle my toes, I go for a walk, I do something to break the trend, break the trance. Because that's what we end up doing, is we're bouncing back and forth, we get into a trance. So, and it's just an interesting phenomenon when we realize we are focusing so much on either what's happened or what's not happened, and not really focusing on the moment. Because, example, a lot of relationships will have an issue. Something gets said, somebody says something,
Yeah.
the other one gets triggered, blames them for triggering them. My response is, take your finger off the trigger and let's see what happens. And they look at me like, what do you mean by that? And I says, somebody said something. Your reaction is, you pulled the trigger of your reaction, which is based on the past.
Yeah.
You're bringing the whole past in to reinforce your being upset or whatever it is, the story you're telling yourself. So let's take it off. And the next time that happens, I want you to pause and reflect just for a second and saying, okay, I'm having a reaction, which I'm going to dissipate. And that brings me into the present moment. And then I'm going to choose, how do I want to respond? And now if you still feel like the situation deserves a response of some kind of anger or something of that nature, fine. But you did it consciously,
Right.
not out of reactivity.
Yeah.
So you're not bringing the past into the moment for a future state of getting even.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And when we start using PRC, pause, reflect, and choose, it
Yeah.
does bring us back and stops the ping-pong effect. And these are not real hard. It's just, are you committed to doing that? Are you committed to being fully engaged and staying with somebody in a way that's supportive to the relationship instead of separating. Because a lot of disagreements are an attempt to disconnect, which falls into somebody has to be right and somebody has to be wrong instead of just listening. So if you remember in the earlier podcast, I pointed out if you want to change your relationships, make eye contact with your children, just quietly. Make it with your partner. That brings them into the present moment. It stops reactivity.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the same thing happens when you have a trigger pull that's playing ping pong. Okay, if I'm fully present in that moment, I make eye contact. I have to shift because now I feel vulnerable. When I feel vulnerable, I'm very present.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Now, the hardest part most of us have, especially in Western civilization, is we don't like vulnerability.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
As one person says, the general belief is that, especially for men, is vulnerability is not a virtue. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you ask their partners, they will all say that, yeah, that's true because he's sure never ever vulnerable.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if you add presence, vulnerability increases safely.
Okay.
Because if I'm present, I can feel open. I can feel open-hearted. I can have a deep conversation. We both walk away feeling like we learned something. We both walked away with something more than we would have had versus a normal cursory conversation. So each one of these ideas is to bring us back to the present moment. And ping pong is one idea. I use these little quips, PRC, pause, reflect, and choose. I have clients that have put PRC on a Post-it note on their monitor, their computer,
Yeah.
to remind them if I pause and reflect, I'm going to give a better answer to a situation. It'll be less reactive.
Yeah.
And the capacity for us to actually advance and move forward is much better.
Absolutely. We just had I had to do a communications the workshop, effective communication, to help team build in a department because the way people were talking with each other was not going well. And one of the things when doing like a focus group with the staff and employees, we were just teaching them how to pause, reflect, and then communicate instead of react, right? React versus responding and learning the difference in that. And it's amazing. But it has to be a learned, practiced, intentional behavior. Because we did the intervention, but I don't know that it changed that department unless people are willing to choose to do these things on a daily basis.
Well, there's a certain level of self-righteousness that gets in people's way. So if you pause and reflect, as you noted, and then communicate, it's the same as choose. But if I don't reflect, the only thing I do is build up more energy to unleash. So they really aren't willing to let go of the past, which is,
Right. Yeah.
do I want to connect? Do I want to, as I use the phrase, be intimate? Excuse me. If I'm intimate, I'm seen and I see that person.
Yeah.
If I make that an important process to me, what ends up happening, pause, reflect, choose, becomes a highly effective communication tool. I acknowledge I had a big reaction. I'll give you an example. I was in a training session, and I had a reaction, and it was a big reaction. And so I'm talking about a room where I'm in a fishbowl in the center with a group of about 10 people, and there's about 20 people who are on the outside observing. And somebody an individual made a very strong racial comment.
Okay.
We're in a diverse, mixed room. I had my own reaction. I immediately bolted out of my chair. I mean, I went up. And I realized this is not going to be good.
Okay.
So I came back down and paused and said, looked him in the eye, and I said, I just had a reaction.
Okay.
And I'm choosing to let go of that reaction. And I'd like you to rephrase what you just said so that I understood clearly what you intended.
Okay.
He repeated it, fully intentional,
Mm-hmm.
which then allowed me to address it in a way that could be potentially supportive. And in this situation, it led to a larger conversation,
Mm-hmm.
one of which he was not willing to change his opinions. And fine, I can accept that. That's where he is. But I wasn't going to engage in a violent or an extremely aggressive conversation
Mm-hmm.
about it. It was like I saw what the issue was, and I chose to deal with it that way. The interesting part is he later found out that the reason he was there for the training was those specific issues. And
Okay.
when he went back,
Mm-hmm.
because he did not change, he actually was terminated as CEO.
Oh wow.
So the point for me is the reactivity is what gets us in trouble, and we begin to play with the past and the future.
Okay.
If I stay just directly in the moment, I can try to have a conversation to understand and work with. And if it becomes a no midpoint, in other ways, no common ground to have the conversation, then I just basically saying is we have no common ground. And at this point, I hear yours.
Mm-hmm.
My position is clearly different, and I don't see a future moving forward with this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
which often surprises people because when they do throw a big statement like that out,
Mm-hmm.
they want a reaction.
Okay.
So I'm not going to engage that because it's not
Mm-hmm.
productive.
So that pulls you back to
Pulls me back to the
yeah,
present of a choice of what do I want to do and how do I want to do it? How
and
do
you
I
don't
want to
get
be in the
sucked
world?
into like their back and forth and
Right,
their. Okay.
right, because it's an endless cycle
Mm-hmm.
of emotional reactivity, and we never get to the conversation, which is help me understand how you got to that conclusion. And
Mm-hmm.
if they're not able to unravel how they think, you're not going to make any progress.
So they can't meet you because they're not grounded there
Correct.
to be
Right.
able to have that vulnerable conversation to unpack.
They're lost
Which,
in a statement,
okay.
a belief, an emotion, whatever you
Mm-hmm.
wish to say.
That might not be valid present now.
Right. So, but if I can get them and says, help me understand how you came to that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the first time they ever looked at it. And
Mm-hmm.
if they do look at it, we begin to have a conversation that they can often get insights.
Mm-hmm.
And insights of, well, that's based on something that happened to me a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Is this still true?
So in your grounded presence, I love it because you're allowing yourself to have reactions, but you're not responding from the place of the reaction.
Correct.
You then remain curious about the other person.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't even have like a judgment.
Mm-mm. You just engage them.
You just engage them from a point of curiosity, and that is the vulnerability that creates this connection to potentially,
It has that potential.
yeah.
Yes. It. So anytime you have these large reactions, if you can get to the conversation of it, help me understand how you got to where that
Mm-hmm.
conclusion, it shifts the conversation completely.
Mm-hmm.
And it's allowed me to be, because as you're well aware, I've done a lot of diversity work
Mm-hmm.
around the world. And I get insights of, oh, I can understand your story now and why you have that reaction. Can you help me understand how it applies to this situation? And they go,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, it doesn't necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if it doesn't necessarily, how do we address that?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just helping people unpack their automatic reaction between the past and the future of how they play ping pong back
Mm-hmm.
and forth.
So that's healing presence.
Always. Yeah, you should know that that's tattooed on my eyelids.
Right.
That's true. So, we are a society of reactivity.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the issue for us.
Yeah.
And when we decide not to be reactive anymore, it shifts everything. So, I think with that, unless you have another question, I think we'll close for this session.
That's a great ending point.
Okay. Well, thank you for watching. I'm Herb Stevenson,
Sahadeo Ramparak.
and we look forward to seeing you at our next podcast or listening, however you do it. Natural Passages, Revealing the Unmarked Doors of Life. Thank you.
Thank you.